What? Huh? What? So last night I was getting ready to go to bed at like 9:30 because I'm an old man who lives an old man life these days. All of a sudden, ironically, I ended up seeing a YouTube video from Funky Diabetic about it before I actually saw the actual trade report. Dude was faster than I certainly ended up being. I can't believe this trade. This trade was not on my bingo card, wasn't on anybody's bingo card. This trade happened on September the 27th, which is the same time that the Dame to the Bucks trade happened last year. So that was another trade that pretty much blindsided everybody, that was not anticipated, that was like, what the fuck just happened? Holy shit, we gotta talk about it. In this case, it's not as big of a deal, but it's a big deal because 2 of the top 10 teams in the NBA exchanged their star, at least quote unquote, big men. Julius Randle is going to be a Minnesota Timberwolves alongside Dante DiVincenzo, who is also heading there, and Karl Anthony Towns is going to be a New York Knick. So this video is just going to be my raw thoughts in reaction to that. I will probably have more nuanced opinions as time goes on because my initial reaction to the trade is not always just like I'm declaring everything I believe about it, but I do want to let you know what my initial thoughts are. So with that said, hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It helps it do much better in the algorithm. And if you want to enjoy this as an audio only experience, check this out over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Let's get into the mentality of why this trade even happened. Why did both of these teams want to do this? Now on the Timberwolves end of things, a lot of it was financial because there was a lot to pay for. Now with the Knicks, they also have a bit of a finance issue, but I don't think it was as extreme. And also the Knicks are just a more valuable franchise, so they can afford it a little bit more. Not that James Dolan has been known for being the most not cheap of individuals, but with that said, I don't think paying for things is really much of a concern for them at the moment, clearly. And the center position was the weakest one on the New York Knicks. There was pretty much every analysis you would hear of the Knicks from myself, any other NBA YouTuber, any NBA media personality was, yeah, roster's good, roster's versatile, but 2 things. The center position, Mitchell Robinson is a fine starting center. Not your first pick, but also not your last pick. That's not the end of the world, but he is very injury prone. And when you look at the center options for this team beyond him, we're talking about a bunch of fairly unproven players. Their best case scenario is Precious Achiuwa, who is like one of the most inconsistent role players in the NBA. So some nights you might feel good about it, other nights you won't, and you're probably never going to feel good about it if the guy ends up starting for you because Mitchell Robinson is sitting on the bench in a suit. That was a position they needed to address, and pretty much everybody was like, okay, well, inevitably there's going to be some sort of trade for the Knicks to get a big man. The number one thing that I had been seeing lately was Walker Kessler from the Utah Jazz. The Jazz are not as sure about him as like a long-term piece as they were after a really strong rookie year. I kind of got the impression from Walker that he's just going to be one of those dudes that is good immediately but doesn't get that much better in their careers. There are a good example of players like that. So they didn't end up going that direction. They went in a far more dramatic direction by adding Karl Anthony Towns. So in order to just not get this all mixed up, I just want to go team by team because it's kind of hard for me to go back and forth between what either team was interested in. But believe me, I have plenty to say about Minnesota. But first, I want to talk about New York because I think they are, without a doubt, the winners of this deal. The other question about the Knicks was, what exactly is Julius Randle's role on this team? Center position, what does the backup look like? Is Mitchell Robinson going to be good enough? Will he be healthy enough? That's the first concern. Second concern, what does Julius Randle look like on this team? Because they got to the second round and probably would have made the conference finals if not for even further injuries beyond what they were already dealing with. And they did that off of the back of Dante DiVincenzo being a really good three-point shooting threat and OG Anunoby just being the ultimate glue guy, like truly modern-day Luol Deng type of shit, given that he plays for Tom Thibodeau. Then in this offseason, they trade for Mikal Bridges. And that was one of the bigger trades of this offseason because there really wasn't a lot of major trades done this time around. So now you're looking at a situation where you have Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby. All of those guys are worthy of at least 28 minutes a game, probably all of them pushing into the 30s. Meanwhile, Julius Randle was not there for their playoff run, and from a functionality standpoint, not just a pure talent, but just like how the inner mechanisms of how an NBA roster works, looked as though perhaps the Knicks would be better off without the guy. There ended up being some posts from him on Instagram. I got a bunch of people saying that it was tongue-in-cheek and that there wasn't any real validity to it. I don't always just go with that because I'm sure the report suggested as much. I'm sure Julius Randle suggested as much, but it's not uncommon for a player to take a quick shot and be like, no, I was just kidding. Eric Bledsoe was just at the barbershop. That's why he didn't want to be here. It was the barbershop, right? Maybe he was at his girlfriend's, wife's, whatever their relationship was. I don't fucking know. Point is, there seemed to be some smoke. And where there's smoke, there tends to be fire. It's not always a guarantee. Usually it is, though. And I'm not surprised that Julius got traded. But what I am surprised about is that they managed to maximize his value to the degree that he did. Because another factor with the prospect of potentially moving on from Julius is what exactly can you get for the guy? What exactly is his fit around the league? What other team would want him? Because Julius is a good player, but he falls into like the DeMar DeRozan, Brandon Ingram tier of player where you're good. You're objectively good at the game of basketball, but how well does your skill set translate in a team setting? The fact that you're not a great three-point shooting threat very often, the fact that you can be really inconsistent with it, in the case of DeMar, just outright not good at it, the fact that you're not really much of an off-ball initiator all too much, the fact that you can get real tunnel vision at times. Sometimes you're a little too okay just taking a mid-range pull-up, and it's just not the best offense in the world for how often you go to it. And for that reason, there was like, okay, well, is he going to play center? Is he going to come off of the bench even? There were reports from Tom Thibodeau that Randle would be okay playing whatever role he would have to play, which implied potential small ball five, implied potentially coming off of the bench. But at the end of the day, it didn't really seem like it was going to work. And that was the biggest area of concern for me for the Knicks beyond the center position. Karl Anthony Towns, while a controversial player in his own right, while a player that has a very wide spectrum of how good people consider him to be in his own right, I think Cat makes way more fucking sense on this team than Julius Randle does. Because here's the thing about Cat. Might not be the greatest defender in the world, but he is better at the center position. And holistically, he is a net positive at the center position. He has been throughout the majority of his career. And while him and Rudy Gobert actually worked really well against the Denver Nuggets of all teams, their matchup situation otherwise really all not too good. In the Phoenix Suns series, they were able to put Cat on KD because KD pretty much takes the same type of shots all the time. Doesn't really matter who you put on him, so as long as it's not an overt mismatch and not someone that he can overtly get by very easily, then it's going to be fine. So they coasted on that in that series. In the Nuggets series, Cat was matched up against Jokic in the one-on-one situation with Rudy Gobert roaming off of Aaron Gordon, and that gave plenty of opportunity for help defense and made the rim essentially shut off. And given that the Nuggets are one of the best paint-scoring teams in the league and not a very prolific three-point shooting team, you're pretty much shutting them off at the source of a majority of their offense. But in the next round, they play a perimeter-oriented team, which is most teams in the NBA. Most teams in the NBA do not have the roster structure that the Denver Nuggets do, and most don't have the structure that the Phoenix Suns do. And ones that do generally have that structure, but better. So, how well was this team actually going to hold up going forward? How well was Cat at the 4 going to work? That was a big question mark. At first, didn't work in their rookie year, their first season with Rudy Gobert there. But the second year, it did have a lot of strides. However, in that conference finals versus Dallas, Karl Anthony Towns was horrible, especially because of his defensive contributions to Dallas, I would say. Ironically, I've seen a lot of people shit on Rudy Gobert because of that series, but the reality is, if you look at the on-off numbers, Karl Anthony Towns was by far the biggest problem for Minnesota in that series, at least among all of their starters. So it made sense to move on from him. I don't know if it made sense to do it for Julius Randle, but again, we are still focusing on the Knicks. And the reason I gave up all that background information that relates to the Timberwolves is for Cat, because Cat, as far as I'm concerned, has been playing out of position. I understand the 4 experiment because of Rudy Gobert's rim protection and the fact that Cat is an excellent floor spacer. It made sense to try it, and it did work in some instances, but I don't think it is a style of basketball that is going to take you to the finish line. It might help you along the way. It might get you pretty damn far. It got them to the Western Conference Finals, but it's probably not enough. At the center position in New York, though, first of all, you have Mitchell Robinson, and you can do situationally the exact same thing. Mitchell Robinson's not the rim protector Rudy Gobert is, but he's a damn good one. Like a damn good one. So if you face a team that, has a structure where you're like, hey, not really all that concerned about this shooter, and all we need for the big man matchup is a big body. What if we just put Cat on that big body and then Mitchell Robinson does the same roaming thing that Rudy Gobert does? Well, you have that versatility, but also I think this is the best structured roster around Karl Anthony Towns of his career, because the starting lineup is going to be Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart. It really doesn't matter what position you slot either of those 3 forwards in the middle at. They can play the 2 through 4, all 3 of them. Doesn't really matter. But you're getting 3 defensive-minded, defensive-first-oriented forwards who are all versatile as hell, who can all defend multiple positions, who are all strong rebounders as well, especially Josh Hart, and they're all capable, Josh Hart not as much, but OG and Mikal, and obviously Jalen Brunson, capable of creating their own offense. I think a problem that existed with the Timberwolves, what I highlighted as their biggest weakness, is both that they overly rely on Ant and Cat to initiate all of their offense. There's really nobody else on the team who's more than just a play finisher beyond that, which isn't too uncommon. But there was an extreme in which, man, if those guys aren't creating, what's happening? And in the case of the Knicks, Cat doesn't have that level of offensive responsibility, while also, I think, being against most teams, in most contexts, against most rosters, a better defensive role as well. Because if you tell Cat, look, you're a drop big, you play the center position, just be a big body, don't be a disaster protecting the rim, and then we can just have all of these Swiss Army knife forwards make up for any potential deficiencies that you or the smaller Jalen Brunson may have. I think the Knicks can still be a very, very good defense, and then offensively, they have improved dramatically because of this deal. Karl Anthony Towns has his limitations in terms of his offensive game. I think a big problem is that he's not very good at attacking mismatches. He's not great at posting up, despite the fact that that seemed like it would be a big part of his game earlier on in his career. He can be, his drives off of the catch, like if he pump fakes, loses his man, goes inside, often sloppy, often ugly, doesn't always shoot as well on those shots as he probably should, but he's still a good scorer. He's an excellent screen setter, and he's an excellent three-point shooter. Three-point shooting was actually not an outright weakness for the Knicks. I don't think it was a weakness, but it could have been better, okay? Josh Hart, not the most consistent three-point shooter in the world. Jalen Brunson's a very good one, but his volume's not always super high given how much he shoots the ball in general. A lot of mid-range pull-ups and floaters for him. Mikal Bridges and OG are both good percentage on relatively solid but not super high volume type of guys. Like good shooters but not great ones. Dante DiVincenzo was a great shooter, but he was going to be coming off of the bench more likely than not, probably having a less prominent role. And even if he was a good three-point shooter, that does not bring as much offensive value as having a 5 who's a really good three-point shooter does. Because now you're pulling all the big men away from the rim. Jalen Brunson was one of the best inside the arc scorers in the entire NBA, despite the fact that he's 6'1" on a good day. He now has more room to operate with than he did previously. He also has a pick and roll option that presents as a very terrifying scoring threat. Obviously, he had Julius Randle there, but I don't know that they always had the best chemistry, and Randle's three-point shooting is remarkably inconsistent. His breakout season where he made the All-Star team with the Knicks, he had a pretty good shooting season, but I believe since then he really hasn't done much special shooting the ball. Yeah, 2021, he shot 41% on 5.5 attempts. The season following that, he's down to 30.8%. Following that, his percentage or his volume increases, and its percentage increases, but it only increases to 34.3%. And then last year in 46 games with the Knicks, 31%. If we look at his last 3 seasons combined, a total of nearly 200 games on 6.5 three-point attempts a night, Julius Randle shoots 32.6%. That's not good for the Timberwolves, but again, we'll get to that in a second. Also, for his career playoffs, both times around with the Knicks, 6.6 attempts a game, both years, 28% from 3. Huge shooting upgrade. And it's at a position of need. Rather than Julius, who plays the 4, and you have a bunch of forwards on your team, instead, a position where you are in great need of has an all-star caliber player at it. Offensively, I think the dynamic between him and Brunson will be better than that with him and Randle. The spacing on the roster will be better. The offense in general will be better. And defensively, I think it works just as well. Obviously, Cat being in a lot more when Mitchell Robinson will probably end up playing less than he otherwise would will mean that area of the defense gets a little bit worse. But I truly think that while the 5 position is the hardest one to hide and mitigate the weaknesses of in the NBA, the Knicks are probably the most capable of it. They probably have the best roster structure to get away with Cat playing the center position, which is important given that that's the position he plays the best. So I think the Knicks can be still a good defense, still one of the best in the NBA, and then their offense has dramatically improved. Not to mention the center position concern is gone. The does Julius Randle fit and make sense for this team concern, that's also gone. You got a player that fits better, plays a position of need, spaces and improves the offense more, and doesn't really hurt your defense too much. That is a home run of a trade. At first, this was interesting to me because Cat isn't exactly a super desired player in the league either. Okay? He wasn't exactly someone who was going to get a bunch of trade value. We were ironically having similar conversations with him as we were with Julius Randle. Like, yeah, it might be for the best for this team to trade that guy, but what are they going to get? Is it going to be of equal value to that player? Probably not. It's probably not even going to get close to that realm, but in this case, both teams managed to do something at least relatively similar to that. But with the Knicks, I'm giving them an A+. Okay, I think this was a great deal. I think Randle didn't make sense here, and I think the center position needed addressing. Did that, all right? Perfect across the board, home run as far as I'm concerned. Losing Dante DiVincenzo isn't great. He had a lot of really good moments last year, but as a whole, he's still probably just a role player tier guy. Well, let's talk about the Timberwolves, okay? I give the Knicks a home run here. The Timberwolves, it's not outright bad, because there is some potential directions they can go here. If they go the just straight up, yes, Julius Randle is our power forward and we're playing him 34 minutes a night and we're treating him like the all-star he was in 2021, I think it'll be ugly, and I think it eliminates the Timberwolves from real, true championship contention. They are already on the lower end of the spectrum for me. I think I ranked them 8th or 9th in the NBA, with there being 9 teams I considered contenders this year. This probably knocks them out of it if they're just outright going with, yeah, Randle is our 4. That said, that's not necessarily what they're going to do. There's two ways that this can go that would actually make this make a good amount of sense. First, Julius Randle comes off the bench. I understand that Julius Randle has been an all-star 3 out of the last 4 seasons. I recognize why you wouldn't think, okay, well, that guy needs to come off of the bench. And that is fair. Fair is fair in that regard. I understand where you're coming from. That said, I don't think this lineup works very well with him in it as a whole. I don't think it's outright going to be terrible, but I think you should try to run lineups where you aren't playing Randle, Gobert, and fucking, why can't I remember his name right now? Forward, defensive forward, really good defensive forward on the Timberwolves. God fucking damn it. Jaden McDaniels. God damn. Why could I not remember that? I don't think those three together is a good idea. Rudy Gobert, obviously a non-shooter. I previously highlighted with Randle, 32% from 3 his last 3 seasons. Jaden McDaniels, last year, 34% from 3. A season before that, he shot 40%, but the volume's not super high. And in the playoffs, actually, damn, I didn't realize he shot this well. I know he shot better in the playoffs, but god damn, he shot 43%. So that is actually more upside than I thought. But you can have good three-point shooting seasons without actually being all that good of a three-point shooter. You can have good three-point shooting seasons without the defense really respecting you. And if the defense doesn't respect you, even if you do make them pay for it twice a game, you're probably still holistically going to have some poor spacing. So on that front, I think the spacing issue will be very concerning for Minnesota. So you probably want to start Naz Reid. Naz Reid isn't necessarily the best and most prolific three-point shooter, but I do think he is better than Julius Randle. 41% from 3 on 5 attempts last season, a career 37% three-point shooter. In the playoffs last year, 36% on decent volume, not the best, not the worst. So I would probably do that, and then you still are able to do essentially the same logic as the Cat thing, where you have a big man who does big man shit and mostly plays the center position, but he can also play the 4, he can also space the floor, and it works. It worked well. Whenever they weren't doing Cat and Gobert, they were either doing Naz and Cat, or they were doing Gobert and Naz. And I think Gobert and Naz, functionally, in terms of how the offense works, again, from just a pure functionality standpoint, makes just as much sense. So this is what I would do if you're keeping Randle, which that kind of hints at where we're going with the other potential option. But if you keep Randle, I would say bring him off the bench, start Naz Reid. You also have Donte DiVincenzo off of the bench as a three-point shooter, which is nice. That can mitigate some potential spacing issues. Maybe you're taking out Jaden McDaniels, you're taking out Gobert, and then like slide Ant down to the 3, Donte at the 2, Mike Conley at the 1, Randle at the 4, Naz Reid at the 5. Maybe instead it's Gobert at the 5. Whatever that may be, you can achieve more balanced lineups. Now, maybe they start him and then they just take the approach of like take him or someone else out early to make the lineups more well-balanced. All I know is I don't think Conley, Ant, McDaniels, Randle, and Gobert is a lineup that I want to close with, and I don't think it's a lineup I want to see much of at all. Naz Reid, I think, makes more sense, so start him. I know Randle is a former All-Star. I know he was an All-Star technically last year, and I know that for all intents and purposes, he should be better than Naz Reid, but I really think fit matters to a degree that, in this case especially, that's the direction they should go. The other potential thing, and this was posited by Alex Hoop, shout out to him, just hit 100K subscribers on YouTube, so congrats to him. It's not out of the realm of possibility that the Timberwolves intend on trading Julius Randle. And this move was essentially just getting Donte DiVincenzo along the way, and then trading Randle for further depth. Let's talk about Donte for a second. Donte DiVincenzo last year averaged 15.5 points per game, shot 40% from 3 on 8.7 attempts per game. That makes him one of the most prolific, high-volume, high-percentage three-point shooters in the NBA, making him one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. Same percentages held up in the playoffs last year as he averaged 18 points per game. And if you go ahead and follow the last 25 games of the season, he averaged 20 points, shot 38% from three on 11.5 three-point attempts a game. He's also decent in terms of functionality, decent playmaker, and a decent defender. I don't know how well Ant can get away with playing the three, but I think a lineup of Conley, Dante, Ant, McDaniels, and Gobert could be a pretty damn good one. I also think perhaps you go with Ant at point guard, and then you run Dante at the 2, McDaniels at the 3, Nas at the 4, and Gobert at the 5, that type of thing. There is some options presented there. I don't really like Julius Randle on this team. I think Julius Randle needs to go to another team. I think there is a good chance, given the amount of money he makes, the fact that he still has an all-star reputation, that you could theoretically trade him for 2 other role players. I don't know what this trade looks like. I don't know who wants Julius Randle, but if you were able to turn Cat into 3 really, really good role players, or like 2 really good ones and a pretty good one, and then now you don't have to worry about his inconsistency, you don't have to worry about his playoff droppage, you don't have to worry about his defensive limitations, and now you just have a deep, well-rounded team with multiple shooters, and Ant is allowed to just be Ant, and then the rest of the players are functionally good enough offensively. Because sure, Cat was a second option who was capable of averaging 20 points per game, but to be honest, I don't really think that he was that integral to Minnesota's offense. But if you're replacing what he's doing with what Julius Randle is doing, I think you'll be much worse for it. Really, the only edge I would give Julius Randle on Cat, probably a better playmaker, better ball handler, and also another point that was made by another NBA YouTuber, and I'm a hack and I just steal everyone's points, but hey, I'm telling you what I heard it from. Hoop Venue on Twitter said a key factor in this Randle deal is the mismatch factor. What I mentioned earlier with Cat not being able to really punish mismatches, Julius Randle's good at that. He's pretty good at that. If you give him a one-on-one matchup against a smaller defender, he's going to make you pay for it. I don't know how much that ends up functionally mattering. I said functional so many times in this video, but it's very important for how both of these guys work and these rosters work. I don't know if that's enough to make up for the fact that when Randle doesn't have the ball, he's going to space the floor kind of poorly, but there's something there, and I think it can work. But unless they bring him off of the bench or unless they trade him, I think this eliminates them from title contention for me. And it's pretty disappointing because the Timberwolves were one of my favorite teams to watch in the NBA. I can't fucking stand watching Julius Randle play basketball, all right? Gonna be fully honest with you, I hate everything about how Julius Randle plays the game. I recognize he's good and does good things, but there's a lot of limitations, and just from a pure aesthetic standpoint, God, I don't want to watch Julius Randle play basketball. And now I kind of have to tolerate that aspect of things when I watch the Timberwolves, who were one of my favorite, if not maybe my favorite team from the playoffs last year. It might have been Dallas a little bit more, but yeah, I'm not happy about that. And for the Timberwolves, I'm going to give them a C-, maybe even a D+ if this ends up being Randle's just starting and this is what they're going with. There is potential for the move to not be over yet and it ends up being better. But as of right now, a home run for the New York Knicks, addressed a position of need, got one of your weirder fits out of there, and spaced the offense better. For the Timberwolves, I don't really know what y'all are cooking, but I hope the meal isn't done yet because it won't be good. Anyways, Nick is actually out of town, but yeah, Nick's not here, so Rudy's gonna edit this one, so shout out to Rudy for editing this video. Also, super fast, want to let you know for the people who are into the My League stuff, I decided to change up the format again because it wasn't really working for me. I'm gonna be back with some stuff soon. Sorry there's been a delay, but I promise I'm not just abandoning ship as I typically do. Anyways, with that said, I'm out. Peace.